Welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. This is an emergency podcast. I'm your host, Zach Guggenheim, and JR would be on with me, but he's taking care of some things right now. But it felt poignant, or it felt like an important time to come on because James Franklin, who served for 12 seasons at Penn State, was fired today. He is no longer the coach of the Penn State Nittany Lions. And I can't say it's too much of a shock. They came in with obviously national championship aspirations. I had them as my national championship pick. And so from them to start ranked number 2 in the AP poll, I believe number 3 in the coaches poll, and then from them to start 3-0 and then to lose the whiteout and double overtime and then lose to UCLA and then at home to Northwestern to be fired. It feels very surreal. I was on X yesterday, and Bryce 10 Barge, who is one of our listeners, he asked me the question, have you ever seen anything like this type of dropout from any team? And I have tried to think long and hard. I've been watching this sport closely probably for 25 years, and I can't think of anything quite like this crash out from Penn State. It's not like they didn't have talent. They have talent all over the place. And so people were not wrong to say that they were national championship contenders. And while I think Penn State fans were frustrated by James Franklin and his inability to get to the promised land, to get to a national championship win, that was the problem. The problem was not the inability to beat teams like Northwestern, right? There were certainly instances in 2021, they lost to Illinois. They kind of had a string of losses, but that was because of injuries. That was because of struggles that they had with roster management. But it seemed like, at least the past few years, they had been making improvements, right? They made key hires that I think people thought, me included, were going to help this team rise above and get to the next level, to go from great to elite. That's why you brought in Andy Kotelnicki. It's why you brought in Jim Knowles. They improved the roster. They went out and got good receivers, Trevor Pena and Devontae Ross. It's why they did all these things. And yet, you even saw it in the beginning of this season, it just didn't feel right. It never felt right. You know, the first game looked okay, but then they played FIU, they played Villanova. And the more you saw them play, you're like, I don't know how I feel about this. And then they play Oregon in what was a contested game. It was double overtime, but even that game felt deceiving. Oregon felt like they were in control. They were up 2 scores. Penn State and Drew Aller, to his credit, brought him back. But the entire time you're like, where was this the rest of the game? And then Drew Aller threw a back-breaking pick that ended the game in double overtime. He did the same thing against Northwestern, by the way. He threw a pick that a senior quarterback should never, ever throw, which I think it leads to a few talking points that I want to get to. Before I do that, though, I want to just personally talk about why this is hard for me. I live in Pennsylvania. I lived in State College for about 4 years. And I'll be honest, I'm an Ohio State fan, but I've always had a soft spot in my heart for Penn State. I was there during the Sandusky scandal. And so, I was doing ministry in the midst of that. And so my heart went out to the students there, the community there. They love that program. They love the football team. And I wanted James Franklin to succeed. I wanted Drew Aller to succeed. I had a chance to interview Drew Aller very briefly when I got press credentials in their game against Kent State, which I know people listening, they'll be like, oh, see, he loves Kent State. I got to cover Penn State It's the only time in my life I've gotten to cover a college team in the press box. And so I just have a lot of affection, despite the fact they're not my team. I have a lot of affection for Penn State. I have a lot of close friends who are Penn State people. And so what I'm about to talk about is not easy. It's not easy, but I think it has to be said. I don't think James Franklin was fired because they went 3-3. Now, you might say, of course that's why he got fired. They went from national championship or bust to being out of the playoff conversation in mid-October. Of course it's about that. And what I'm going to say is I think that's a fruit of the problem, but I don't think that's the actual problem. The actual problem is lack of leadership. And I don't want to kick a man when he's down, but the thing that I have been struck by since the beginning of the season, and even a little bit back to last year, I have been a Drew Aller, like I've wanted Drew Aller to succeed for a while, right? Like I really appreciate Drew Aller. I think he has all the tools. I really hope he gets better soon. But Drew Aller never really progressed. We kept waiting for him to make the next step, and he never did. And it wasn't just his vision of the field. It wasn't just him making progressions. It wasn't just being late on throws or improving in accuracy. It was a little bit of the leadership stuff, the mental part of the game. So even early on, and I commented about this in earlier episodes, there would be times where they wouldn't get the ball off and there'd be a timeout. And Drew Aller kind of looked like he was about to throw a temper tantrum. And the thing that always struck me is it kept happening. And I'm like, there's got to be someone on the sidelines, a coach that he trusts, that would tell him that's not how you win your team over. That's not how you lead. You need to lead with composure. You need to lead with, yes, have your heart on your sleeve, but also like be in control of your emotions. And he never was. Now, to his credit, when the game was on the line, he tried to step up, right? It's why he got hurt. And again, prayers up for him. I really hope he can make the best of his rehab. I hope he can get back in that NFL draft conversation. But that's another conversation for another day. Nobody helped him become a better leader. And that is on the coaches. That's on Andy Kotelnicki. It's on the quarterback's coach, and it's on James Franklin. They never helped him develop. It was my frustration with when Christian Hackenberg was at Penn State 10 years back. Christian Hackenberg under Bill O'Brien, I felt like had progressed. And then under James Franklin, it was like, this guy is not it. And he never took a leap. Felt like McSorley and Sean Clifford. I felt like those guys were good in the sense that they got James Franklin out of a lot of jams, but I wouldn't say they ever really developed as passers. Right. And they were limited as passers too, right? But they made their hay by being dual threat guys. Drew Aller was supposed to be the pro style guy who got Penn State over the top. And maybe some of it was just Drew Aller. We'll never know. But the reality is, from sophomore year to senior year, he looked like the same guy. Great tools, great measurables, but never really progressed. And it wasn't just the physical side, it was the mental side. And that falls on the coaches. And so to me, this is not a conversation about should they have kept Bo Pribula or Drew Aller, right? I think that's a moot point at this point. This is a failure to develop men, which is what college coaches are supposed to do first and foremost. It's to develop young men. and they failed. They failed. And it wasn't just with his behavior, but you saw it with Drew Aller lying on the field with a season-ending injury, a college career-ending injury, and no one helping him up to the sidelines. It's denied Dennis Sutton at the end being asked about the run defense, and he said, "That's not my job." This is a failure of epic proportions to lead this locker room. And I don't know what happened behind the scenes. I'm not going to speculate, but ultimately that's why this had to happen. The fans were tired of it. The locker room was done. And they were staring down the barrel of not just a bad season. Forget playoffs. They might not make a bowl game. They might not make a bowl game. And so you have to stop the bleeding. They still might not make a bowl game, but if you are Pat Kraft, you have got to find a way to stop the bleeding, to get the fan base back, and to get your locker room back, and to salvage your locker room. Because guess what? You've got to convince some guys to stay for next year, right? You've got to stay. You've got to convince guys like Chaz Coleman, like Tony Rojas, like Anthony Donko, like AJ Harris, like Luke Reynolds. You've got to convince them to come back. You've got to convince recruits, your top recruits, hey, this is still going to be a place where you can come and develop. So they had to stop the bleeding to signal to that locker room, this is done. Now, they are going to pay James Franklin close to $50 million. I think the buyout was 56. I wouldn't be surprised if they've negotiated a little bit. It is looking like from reports, both ESPN and CBS News, that it is currently $56 million. I wonder if there is some sort of negotiation that happened that we don't know about yet, but at least to this point, they are paying him $56 million. So James Franklin's going to be fine. His ego is going to be hurt, but he's going to be able to ride off into the sunset a little bit, get out of state college, rehab, take care of himself. I really appreciated Bill Landis and Doug Lesmerises. They're on the Bill and Doug show, formerly Kings of the North. They were talking about how it would be good for, this is before the firing happened, that it would be good for James Franklin to get away now, get away from kind of the toxicity of the situation, and to rehab a little bit, just mentally, take a year off and then come back in the coaching ranks. Because there's no way this is going to be salvaged. There's no way this is going to be salvaged. But ultimately, this is a loss of locker room, loss of culture, which leads me to, I think, my biggest frustration with this whole thing. If you're going to fire James Franklin, you need to fire Andy Kotelnicki and Jim Knowles now. Not yesterday or not tomorrow, now. Because they are just as culpable, if not more culpable, than James Franklin. Now, I am grateful that they did not elevate either of them as head coach, because they have been, quite honestly, worthless this season. And we'll talk probably more about the takeaways from the Penn State Northwestern game in our takeaways from Saturday. But I don't know how you keep Kotelnicki, because he has been hot garbage as a play caller, and again, has not developed his offense. And Jim Knowles, who cost Penn State $3 million, has been abysmal. I was listening again to Bill and Doug, and they made a great point. The Penn State defense had one concern, and this was on the broadcast: Griffin Wilde. Griffin Wilde is the guy that they need to watch out for. And who did they leave open 7 times for 90 yards and a touchdown? Griffin Wilde. You had one job. You had one job, Jim Knowles, and you blew it. Like, it is abominable that these two guys are still employed. Now, I know what people might say. Terry Smith needs coordinators. Terry Smith, again, is the guy who's going to take over for James Franklin. Terry Smith needs coordinators. Okay. Elevate some assistants because these two don't know what they're doing right now. They should be fired. They did not help. And at the end of the day, here's my biggest takeaway. And I think this is Franklin, but also I think Andy Kotelnicki and Jim Knowles. And this is why I think they all should be fired. At the beginning of the season, it kind of felt like, and I never wanted to say it, but it kind of felt like James Franklin could copy and paste what Michigan and Ohio State did in 2023 and 2024. Hire elite coaches, bring back a lot of pieces, and make a run. That's what Michigan did. That's what Ohio State did. That's what we're going to do. And we even stole Ohio State's coordinator. Okay, fine. But if you're going to do it, you can't just say we're going to do what they did. You have to believe in yourselves. You have to believe in what you're doing. And you have to be willing to change as you see your team and as you see the needs. And this is the frustration with this whole thing. They never changed. They never changed, right? James Franklin, when they lose to Oregon, he does the same thing. 1-0, 1-0. We have UCLA, 1-0, 1-0, 1-0. That's our mission. And then they lose to UCLA. At that point, you have to stop and say, okay, something's not working. Because all of a sudden, you go from being a leader of men to a snake oil salesman with no soul and no heart, right? And, they lose to Oregon and they put Jim Knowles up there and say, so what did you do when Ohio State lost to Oregon? Okay, you can't just copy and paste. That's what it felt like. It was like, we're just going to do what Michigan and Ohio State did and not actually put in the work of being connected to these players, being connected within that locker room. And so I don't know the inner workings of what was going on, but to me, that's the story. The story is not, oh, they're out of the playoff race. Like Penn State could have gone 9-3 this season, and James Franklin could have kept his job. It's not the fact that they lost 3 games. It's the way they lost. It's the way they look. It's the way that they're talking. It's a lack of leadership, and it had permeated the entire locker room. So where does Penn State go from here? They've got to convince recruits, and they've got to convince their locker room. Again, the transfer portal window will open once the coach is fired. We'll see if there's any activity. I thought there would be activity with UCLA. There wasn't, or there hasn't been, and they've been rejuvenated. This is a tough place to be because Penn State in their next 3 games at Iowa, at Ohio State, home against Indiana. I don't know if you win a single game out of those 3. And then it's at Michigan State, home against Nebraska, at Rutgers. You can make a case that they could lose at least one of those games too. Like at least Nebraska, maybe at Rutgers. So this is not looking good, and you've got to try to retain your players and retain recruits. Now, the good news is, aside from quarterback, which Aller is hurt, you still have a great roster. So if you can have Terry Smith persuade your guys to be like UCLA and say, hey, let's rally the troops. Let's get everybody going. They have the talent to beat everyone else on their schedule, including Ohio State. Now, I know people might laugh at that, but there's a reason why they were number 2 in the AP poll. There's a reason why people like Jerry DiNardo were saying, this is the most talented team I've seen in the preseason. They have the talent, but can they rally the troops? I think that's going to be really hard. So that's one thing. They've got to find a way to rally the troops, because that's one of the ways they're going to be able to convince and persuade current players and future players to stay on board. So that's one thing. Second thing is they've got to nail the coaching hire. Now, I'm looking on ESPN's report on this, and they have 5 candidates for the job. I already know they're out of their minds. Because the first one's Matt Rule. He's not leaving Nebraska. He's not leaving Nebraska. Like, I just don't think that's going to happen. You could make the argument. He did play at Penn State, so maybe I'll take that back. Matt Rule could do it. I think that'd be really hard, though. Nebraska's invested a lot. You could make the argument that Penn State is a better job than Nebraska. But what if Matt Rule is making Nebraska and remaking them into a place that could be a national championship contender? I don't know. That's one that I'm not sure about. The one where I do think they're out of their minds on is Curt Cignetti. I don't know why anybody would think that Curt Cignetti is leaving Indiana. Indiana just beat Oregon and is now one of the favorites to not just make the Big Ten championship game, but to win the Big Ten. They are going to be in the playoffs for a second year in a row, something Penn State will not be. He's got a ton of credibility there. He's building it up. The fan base loves him. He's not leaving. He's not leaving. So Matt Rule, I'll take it back. Matt Rule could be a really good fit because he walked on for the Nittany Lions and played linebacker there. He worked under Kraft. So that is a possibility. I don't know how real that could be, though. So I think that's one. But I don't think Curt Cignetti's, he's not there. I think Matt Campbell, Matt Campbell's I like Matt Campbell. I don't think he moves the needle a ton. Manny Diaz, again, I don't know if he moves the needle a ton. Dan Mullen, I don't think he moves the needle a ton. Like, those are the 5 that ESPN mentioned. And, there's a couple under the radar guys. Alex Golesh, who's at USF. I think that could be a good hire. But man, who do you get? I think you need someone seismic, but even Matt Rule doesn't feel seismic. He feels solid. But if you're going to get rid of James Franklin, you're going to do a complete reset, and you're going to tell recruits, we are serious about building this program up. I don't know, getting an also-ran from Florida and Dan Mullen, no thanks. Manny Diaz, who got fired from Miami, no thanks. Maybe Matt Campbell, but he's been good at Iowa State, but they've never been big time. Right? And they're struggling right now. Matt Rule might be the best fit, but even that feels blue collar. And maybe that's what Penn State needs, is blue collar. But I just don't know if that's going to be a great fit. Again, alumni base and his alumni connection, his connection to Pat Kraft, sure. But I don't love where Penn State is. And I think if Penn State thinks they're going to get a guy like a Lincoln Riley or a Curt Cignetti, a Ryan Day, I just think you might be in for some disappointment. I think this season's going to put Penn State back for a few years. And I hate to say that, but Penn State has started to put more money into NIL, but they're nowhere near the top names in the Big Ten. And that they're going to be under the gun with this $56 million buyout. So this is, I don't want to be dramatic, but in a sense, it sets them back kind of similar to what happened several years ago with the scandal. And this is nothing like that scandal, by the way, but I think it's going to set them back a little bit because they have to get the right coach. They have to make sure that they invest in the right guys. and they've got to rebuild that locker room. They got to rebuild the culture. And there are not many, if any, Kurt Signettis, and most guys are going to need, 2 to 3 years. And so I hate it for Penn State. I hate that this had to go this way, because I don't like, I think James Franklin's a good guy. And I thought he was a good coach for Penn State for a lot of years. He did a great job of taking Penn State from, being a mediocre program after the sanctions to a very, very good program. Nobody can deny that. Like, James Franklin, at the end of the day, like, people are going to remember, they're going to remember his failure here. But, in 12 years, he was 104-45. And so he averaged 8.5 wins a season. That's including the COVID year. He won at least 10 games, 6 years. He won 9 games in a 7th year. And remember, he is taking over a program that before he got here, had loss of scholarships. They went 7-5 in 2013 and 8-4. Bill O'Brien was able to keep them, but he was able to keep up in a conference that got better and better and better. People forget that. The Big Ten was terrible when James Franklin got here, and it continued to ascend. And now he's got to deal with teams like Oregon. He's got to deal with the Death Star of Ohio State. He's had to deal with a Michigan program that was its best, had its best 10-year run from 2015 to 2024. Over the past, between that and 2005 to 2015, Michigan was at its best this second 10-year span. So there's a lot of grace to be given for James Franklin's career at Penn State. Like, it was not all bad. He was not always in my mind, a canned leader. But in a sense, this is like, it's unfortunate that his legacy is going to be that he got fired. He got fired because of this downward crash out. And I think a big part of it is he didn't hire the right people. He didn't hire the right people, and he did not help develop people and players. And so it's sad. I'm sure we'll talk more about it here on the Big Ten Huddle. So stay tuned. Penn State fans, I feel for you. I am sad with you as a fellow Pennsylvanian, but I hope better times do come, because I think Penn State, if they get the right hire in the next 3 to 4 years, I think they're back in the college football playoff discussion. I think they're back in the Big Ten championship discussion. But this is just how it is right now. So thanks for watching. Make sure you tune into the Big Ten Huddle every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 9 p.m. And we will be back Sunday night, Tuesday night, talking about the next group of games. Thanks. Take care.